Well, the class characteristics you can always get from the well, not always, but you can get them not from the scratches on the groove, the grooves in the lands, because they don't have any rifling, they don't have that. But remember the remains, the shotgun shell remains, they're sometimes called wads, especially the part that holds the pellets together. Anyway, so you recover these parts. That can tell you what kind of shell was used, and often the kind of shell tells you what kind of gun was used. This is not individual, of course. This is a class characteristic. Also, if you can recover the pellets and you weigh them, you can know what kind of shotgun shell produced this number of pellets or this mass of pellets. So again, that's class characteristic. You know the shot, the shot and the shell, but you don't necessarily know which gun it was, or because many people could use the same kind of shotgun shell. Many people could use the same kind of shotgun. So it's a class characteristic, not individual. There's also the spread of the shot. Because as we mentioned, the shot spreads out of a shotgun, and different shotguns, it spreads out a different amount. So that tells you a little bit about the shell used and the kind of shotgun used. The gauge of the shotgun, that is a measure of how the shot spreads out of the shotgun. So when you get the spread of the shot, let's say 10 inches, whatever it might be, you can kind of tell what the gauge of the shotgun was. Of course, this can also depend on the distance away, but assuming you know the distance, the spread of the shotgun will tell you the gauge of the shotgun. The gauge is a measure of the barrel of the shotgun, how it constricts the shot. So the larger the gauge, the smaller the barrel of the shotgun. Let's say, as I mentioned before, the 12 gauge is larger. The barrel of the shotgun is smaller, and therefore it spreads more. The larger the gauge, the more it spreads, because the longer the barrel, the more it's going to be constricted, and the less it's going to spread out. So 12 gauge spreads out more than a 10 gauge shotgun. For anyone who's into old-time video games, Duke Nukem, his shotgun was a 10 gauge, and the Doom guy from Doom, his shotgun was a 12 gauge. Okay, a little bit of trivia for you. Okay, so there's another way to identify the gun by finding the spent shotgun shells. We really need those, and this can tell you a little bit more about the gun, and might even give you individual characteristics. So, in all cases, as we've seen, the firing pin hits the primer of the bullet or the shell, and the resulting mark on the bullet or the shotgun shell can actually be used as an individual characteristic, like striation marks. Now you have striation marks for rifles, but not shotguns. But we'll talk a little bit more about this soon. Cartridges, or not necessarily in shotguns, but it happens sort of there a little differently. But anyway, the cartridges, they get blown back. Now let's take a look at what these things are. Let's take a look at let's take a look at this image here. Maybe we can blow it up a little bit. There we go. Okay, so taking a look at what's going on. This little hole is where the bullet gets ejected. So again, the bullet gets into the firing chain. You push it in here. The mechanism shoves this. Okay, first, I'm not sure if this is actually a better image of it, because it looks like it's blocked. But let's get the other picture. Hang on. Oops. Yeah, let's take a look at this one. Okay, so the bullet goes in here and gets fed as the action works. This is a double action, so it sort of gets moved right into this area. And when it shoots off, everything everything gets jerked and jumps around until you put the next bullet in there. But let's talk a little bit more about that. Okay, so the first bullet gets moved in here, it gets pushed up here, moved into position over here. It shoots. Now, Okay, remember that's only this part that that shoots. Let's see if I can get this. Oops, I guess not. Okay, never mind. Let's get back here. That didn't work. Try this again. There we go. Okay, so the bullet is moved into this position. The firing pin hits it. This part shoots out. This part, that's the cartridge, or the cartridge case, if you want to call it that, because it's only a case, no bullet in there. The cartridge case gets either from the recoil or from the blast, whatever it is. It gets blown back over here, where it gets ejected from this ejection area. So it gets ejected, and now there's room for the next bullet to get pushed up and back in here. And that's what a lot of what the spring is. It like moves it back, whatever it is, and out ejects it and pushes this thing back up there. It's again, complicated device. I'm not going to go into it, but the point is that when this bullet shoots out, again, the bullet is in this position. The bullet fires out. This thing gets blown back into this ejection area and gets ejected from here out the side and lands on the floor. So all these different actions, like when the bullet is shoved in there and pushed in here, it can develop some scratches on the side based on the individual gun. There might be some dirt there. It'll get scratched in a specific way. Every person's gun is different. Every person's gun has tiny little scratches that'll scratch the cartridge in a different way. So when it gets put in there, when it gets put into the firing chamber area over here, it can develop some scratches that's individual for each gun. When it gets blown back, remember after the bullet fires, this thing recoils, or the gunpowder causes the blast back, gets blown back here. That can cause its own kind of scratch that is individual for each gun. And when it gets ejected and gets shoved out the side of this hole to land on the floor, presumably, that also causes certain scratches that are individual for each gun. All these different things enable us to, from the cartridge, from the spent cartridge, to identify the original gun. So let's get back to where we were. Okay. Oops. Okay. So they get blown back into the firing process. That has the identifying scratches. They also get ejected. And that also causes its own scratches. And also the act of loading it and having the bullet being pushed into the correct place in the firing chamber. That also can create identifying scratch marks. For a revolver, this is not necessarily true, because everything just revolves. It doesn't necessarily develop scratch marks from being loaded. But again, it's possible, depending on how your revolver works and whether things get scratched when they're put in. Anyway, so these are from the cartridge. We can get individual characteristics, and this might even, and to a certain extent, as we'll see, that will work for shotgun shells as well, but where you can't get the information from the bullet itself. As mentioned, also the firing pin. The firing pin has to hit the primer. Now, the firing pin again has its own little scratches and little designs on it, or who knows what, little indentations, and every firing pin can hit the primer and leave its own indentations. So, and each individual gun can be identified by